nobody wants to be working 12 hours a day. I didn't want to. You can have guardrails of like, okay, we're going to get this much done. Of course, if an athlete wins a medal, if you work in social media, you're going to be on your phone. You can't really switch off during the Olympics. That's just the nature of it.
Welcome to the Evolve Voices podcast, a platform to hear the fascinating stories behind the people that power global commerce. I'm Edilsa, a brand advisor, and your US host of Evolve Voices. Managing people can be one of the most rewarding and chaotic parts of a career, especially when you're in the middle, not quite at the top calling the shots, but not on the ground either, just doing the work. You're juggling teams across time zones, projects that span months, and expectations from every single direction. Today, we hear from Abha Gallewale, who managed athlete endorsements at ASICS for close to a decade. She had to keep track of schedules, shoots, contracts, digital campaigns, all while making sure her team didn't burn out and that the work actually got done. One standout moment, she tells us, is her time at the Paris 2024 Olympics, orchestrating a global storytelling campaign across 25 athletes, 10 sports, often working 12-hour days. It's what middle management really looks like in a high-stakes environment. We've all been there, right? Where we have to shuffle and be like, who's assigned on what day? And a lot of what I'm hearing, probably lots of meetings happening. Your job probably starts after hours. What are we talking about here? Were you kind of working 10-hour days at one point?
Yeah, definitely more. It was hard because I also think going to that middle management thing is I'm definitely the type of manager that, like, as much as I can, I want to protect my team from the chaos. Which means that you might not give them all of the information from the beginning if it's not organized yet. Like if I feel like everything around me is chaotic, I'd rather like, okay, I'll manage the chaos. Here's what I can give to you that I know is organized. And then let me let you in once it feels more organized. That's the type of manager that I am. Other people might appreciate more of a heads up, even if there is chaos, and say, I want to know about the chaos, even if I'm not working on it, so that I'm mentally prepared. Like, again, these are lessons that you learn. Yeah. So for me, I think the challenge was if I have 25 athlete videos, for example, from 10 or 11 different countries, 10 or 11 different sports, I am working with these regional managers in each of those. I'm not going to 25 different shoots, right? So I'm delegating to a lot of these regional teams. But then I need to be on during their time to make sure, hey, are we on track? Did we get the scope from the production agency? When's the shoot planned? Did the athlete come back? Like, it would be great if they were all, filling in the tracker that I'd made and giving me updates there, but they weren't because this was like one part of their job.
Yeah.
So I had weeklies with every single, if we say 10 countries, I had weeklies with each of those teams in Japan, in Australia, in Europe, in South America. And so I had calls at it's not like I was still sleeping. I'm not saying that it was in the middle of the night. But, and then I had to keep straight, like, okay, where are we at in this phase? And that's like, before next week, I need you to make sure you're going to get this done because we're running out of time and you need to tell me what's going on. So I think the hours were crazy. I think, like I said, I was so motivated. Like, this is the pinnacle of my career that I want to accomplish. And I want to be able to tell these athlete stories that for me, that was enough of a mission, even though I was probably really tired and exhausted to move to the finish line.
I'll be honest. This is one of those conversations that hits close to home. Because anyone who's ever been in the middle knows it's tough. You're holding a lot of space, people, pressure, process, and still expected to deliver flawlessly. So let's get into it. You talk about how you get this news a week out from going to Paris, right?
Olympic advertising rules are extremely strict. So it's something called Rule 40. And it basically prohibits anyone that's not an Olympic sponsor from being able to affiliate themselves with the Olympics, integrate their marketing with the Olympics, because the idea is Olympic sponsors pay millions of dollars to have those rights. And so nobody else should have those rights.
Yeah.
The problem is that now with streaming and, people not watching live TV the same way as much anymore, Olympics specifically was losing viewership for the past couple of cycles because millennials, Gen Z, they weren't necessarily tuning in live to watch Olympic sports the way they used to, especially if they're in Tokyo in a different time zone and you're in the US or Europe, or especially, no matter where, like people might not be watching live and that hurt it. So they kind of were at this sort of breaking point of, if we protect these rights too much, people are going to care less about the Olympics as a whole. And that's actually less beneficial. So if we want to grow the Olympic movement, we need to figure out a way to strike this balance of allowing more people to cover it, but then not so much that it's infringing upon other people's rights. So we engaged in this pilot alongside a lot of other competitors. Like we did it with Nike and Adidas and Puma and ASICS. Signed this agreement that basically said, we're going to pilot this project for 2024 in Paris, where we are not allowed to directly promote our products with the athletes or anything like that. Like an athlete can say, I won a gold medal wearing XYZ shoe. Like that is not allowed. That's too much. But we can congratulate them when they win a medal. We can say good luck. We can use hashtag Paris 2024. That wasn't even allowed before. You couldn't even, if you had athletes during the Olympics winning gold medals, all you could do is post generic advertising that had to have been in market for at least 90 days and assume that the audience just knows that they won a medal because you're posting about them. Like that, it was such a stretch. You couldn't say Olympics, you couldn't say anything. So that it basically incentivized brands that obviously were spending a lot of money on these sponsored athletes to then invest in storytelling, which would hopefully increase coverage of the Olympic movement. So it was kind of a win-win for everybody. So I think the low point was realizing that, like, you know, I had the opportunity to work with our sports marketing team to negotiate all of those digital rights. It was incredible. Like I learned so much and it shaped so much of where I want to go in my career. But then I realized that education hasn't been universal yet. So even though, you know, we were disseminating webinars even internally within ASICS so that people could understand the rights are complex and people have been working a certain way for a long time. That spread everywhere. Like that meant agents of athletes didn't realize that the rules had changed, or, you know, national Olympic committees might not realize the rules had changed. So when it came down to launching these athlete videos and campaigns, obviously we want to collab with these athletes. We want, you know, like we want them to be spreading the message, not just coming from us. But by the finish line, I think the big low point was feeling like, oh, this athlete just won't accept this collab because their agent says it's not allowed. I'm calling them, our sports marketing person is calling them, sometimes the IOC, like the International Olympic Committee lawyers were calling them, and they felt, no, I don't want to take the risk because the liability, like they could get disqualified from the Olympics if they broke a rule. Yeah. And that's not worth it to them. And then you think you put all of this effort, all of this like blood, sweat, and tears into this, knowing that it's legal, and you can't convince them that it's not. So,
how did that feel that day when you realize it? Do you come home and you're just like, I'm going to grab a drink? Like, what else is there to do? Like the weight of putting so much effort.
I think whether it's for good or bad, at that point, we were like a week out of the Olympics.
We talk a lot about managing up and the compromises you need to make. Managing down, how was that communicating it to your team? Hey, we have to scramble. How does that feel? How did that look in action?
Nobody wants to be working 12 hours a day. Like I didn't want to either. So you can have guardrails of like, okay, we're going to get this much done. Of course, if an athlete wins a medal, we all, like if you work in social media, you're going to be on your phone. You can't really switch off during the Olympics. That's just the nature of it. But I have half of my team that's back home, and we need to set up things in place where if we want someone to put paid media dollars behind some athlete's post and the athlete medals on a weekend, we have to have protocols in place to say, okay, we can't wait all the way until Monday in the US because then it's like 72 hours after the medal wins and then it's not relevant. But we also can't say that everybody has to be online waiting until that thing happens. So then we set up like, okay, maybe people take shifts. There's 3 weekends that the Olympics is going to happen. One person is on call for each weekend. And then we would give a heads up, like tomorrow on Saturday and Sunday, we're expecting this competition. These athletes might win a medal. So just a heads up, this might happen. Or actually, none of these people even made it to the finals. So don't even worry about it. We should be good. So I think there was that element of it, of trying to set those guardrails up in advance. But also, and this was a learning I had, is hindsight is 2020. And it is important to level set that with your team of saying, I'm doing the best I can to plan and figure out everybody's roles and responsibilities. At the same time, this is also the first time I'm at an Olympics on site. Like I worked for ASICS during Tokyo 2020, but I was sitting in my apartment in Cambridge doing social media postings with a 13-hour time difference. Like I didn't sleep then either. It's not the same. And so I think in hindsight, I wish I'd level set the thing of like, we're all figuring this out as we go. So we're going to make the best laid plans. If we end up having to go a little bit sidestepping from the plan. I want everyone to feel supported, but also okay and flexible to have that sense of expectation. Because if you're expecting everything's going to be like this and then it's not, it does cause a sense of disappointment, sometimes annoyance. So yeah, definitely learnings on my end.
It's not just her. Studies show middle managers log more hours than almost anyone else in corporate life, an average of 48 hours a week, often bleeding into nights and weekends. They spend nearly 35% of that time in meetings, another 40% in follow-ups and firefighting. It's the squeeze zone. You weren't just a manager, you were in many ways an individual contributor, also putting your weight down, which is a lot of what happens when you're in this, you're managing teams, but you're also in charge of work yourself, which leads to these hours and everything else going on. And It's probably why you're such a visionary, but also must be frustrating, right?
Yeah, it's a challenge. I think everybody has a different sense of, I don't want to say attachment to work because I think that sounds unhealthy. I don't think we should feel like married to jobs or anything like that. So I don't mean it that way. But I personally think, at least for me in my career, if I feel deeply passionate about whatever it is I'm working on or doing, at least thus far, if I'm fortunate enough that I don't have something major, in my personal life going on that's obviously taking away from that, I can kind of be a little bit all in and say, like, okay, for this fixed period of time, this is what we're looking to accomplish. And this is what we need to do to get there. And that sometimes was detrimental for me. Like for this whole Olympics campaign, I didn't have a project manager. And I'm someone that I will say one of my biggest corporate weaknesses, if someone says like in an interview, like, what are your weaknesses?
Yeah.
I will say it is that I take my resources as fixed and I don't say, hey, I'm going to need more if we're going to accomplish this. I'm like, whatever, if my team can't do it, I'll make up the difference. If we don't have enough money for this, I'll figure out how to do it with less. Like whatever it is, it's like, that's kind of my weakness.
Yeah.
And so I think for me, it was realizing you can't always motivate your team to feel the same way, nor should you.
Too senior to say no, too junior to set the pace, but it's also the proving ground, the place where the best ideas like Abha's start to take shape.
I was going to say, I feel like it was such serendipity for us to meet a few months ago at eTail and to have the conversation then and really hit it off.
One of the things we talked about when we were at eTail, yes, step one is realizing that athletes are influencers. But you went a step further. You were like, they're measurable marketing partners. Like this is something that we can win with. That must be frustrating when, in a company, you're expected to follow orders, execute flawlessly, but you're still thinking big. And so you need to figure out like, I have this big idea and you can't, and you don't always have the permission to run with it. When did that hit you when you were having this idea of a measurable marketing partner? Was it during one of the endorsement works you did?
Yeah. I think it probably came to me over a period of time. I think it did start, it started with realizing, that the way ASICS was operating with its athlete endorsements was the KPIs for success were contingent on, athletes. How many athletes can we get to win podiums at major marathons? How many medals can they win during a major World Athletics Championship? How many tennis players will be in the top 100 or the top 10 or, all of those kinds of things. It was very accomplishment, achievement focused, the KPIs around these endorsements. And so when I started at ASICS, it's like athletes are primarily, their appearances are specific to like photo shoots and product shoots and campaign shoots. It was still in its infancy to think, hey, during a major, let's say Grand Slam, we should, when the athletes come to visit, the ASICS sort of corporate event space that's been set up, it shouldn't just be to meet with their sports marketing counterpart and discuss the product that they're going to get. We should also be capturing content with them. Like even that was a relatively new thing that started in the past several years since I've been there. So it started with that. And then it's like, okay, we have this great content. We're posting it on the ASICS social channels. Then collabs came out. And then you're thinking, okay, we want the athlete to collab with us and all these things. So while all of that was happening in the industry, we would also, a lot of times when we would ask the athlete, hey, or we would ask our sports marketing counterpart, hey, can you ask this athlete to post this and all these things? Some of the athletes would push back and say, no, we're not going to do it. You didn't give us enough heads up. Some of them, you would give them all of the content. They still wouldn't post it. So I started digging in and saying, like, we pay them so much money. Why aren't they posting? It's like, right. Oh, they don't have that written into their contract. Right. So that's when, and I'm not saying all of them, I'm just saying some of the contracts probably didn't have social media requirements at that point. This was definitely a few years ago. So then it was working with our sports marketing team to say, okay, we should now in our next phase of contract renewals, we should have a social media clause that we can modify for each athlete. We can have a standard and then we modify based on their own social platform. You know, how much are they really posting? If someone is only posting once a month on social, we can't ask them to post 12 times a year because it's going to be all ASICS and that will feel forced. It has to be dependent on how are they doing it with other brands and sponsors? How does it feel authentic within their overall social media presence? Like, we can do that, but we should at least be thinking about that. And then one step forward was then negotiating, some part of your bonus is contingent on you meeting this obligation, because a contract is only as good as its enforcement. So we would also find like there might be these hidden social media clauses in these contracts, but if ASICS has like 700 athletes that they're managing, nobody has the time or the bandwidth or the resource to actually track, like, well, are you actually using all of them, or are you just they're just getting paid their whole contract without having to do anything? So it started in those stages of realizing like how the back end works in terms of deciding who to sponsor and how those endorsement deals work. As time went on, we were obviously then starting to provide more digital reporting for the sports marketing team of, if we do a Novak Djokovic post on ASICS tennis, how did it do? And then the sports marketing team can say, look, because of Novak, we have X number of engagements or something like that. So that's when I think I started to have the wheels turning a little bit to say, if these digital metrics are valuable for you, the athletes obviously also have their own digital channels. We should be tracking that. And that actually helps to prove the ROI of this endorsement. And that way you're not relying only on whether Novak gets into the top 10. You're not relying only on whether this person gets a gold medal. You're saying this person might not ever be top 10 in a marathon, but they have 100,000 social media followers and they're integrating the product into their everyday post. They're tagging the product. We can show that there's 300 clicks per day from that post to the asics.com site. I would argue that's a much more valuable metric than whether they came top 10 in a marathon. You can debate that, but like at least it can be a yes and, right? So that's how those wheels kind of started turning.
Did you feel heard when you were talking about these digital extra KPIs and be like, hey, it's not just about accomplishment. There might be something else here.
Yes and no. I think when I was talking about it like this, the way I am to you, people that might not have a digital background and again are more focused on scouting and signing athletes and stuff, it might be one of those like, oh yeah, that sounds nice kind of thing. For me, I felt like the breakthrough came when we migrated tools. Like we used to use a tool called Sprinkler, which is very popular in the social media space.
For events.
Then we migrated to a tool called Dash Social, which is great. And part of they had sort of an influencer management tool. It wasn't specific to athletes, but an influencer management tool where you could basically, add in whatever influencers you wanted into the tool. You could be tracking in general, like the public data, like the public facing engagements, their follower growth and things like that. But then if they opted in, like the athletes, for example, if they opted in to give their data to this platform, we could then literally track for ASICS specific posts what the data is beyond that. Like if they're tagging product, what their engagement rate looks like, how is that above average for other engagement rates that they have on their other platforms and things. And so when I saw that, I set up a dashboard of, let's say, 20 athletes. And I took our sports marketing team at all levels, like everywhere from, the individual contributor level to the manager level to our senior GM level, and walked them through like, now we can be tracking this. This is a dashboard I've set up. I can do this for hundreds of athletes. You can log in. You don't have to do any slicing and dicing. You don't have to you could just click on this athlete and say, for this year, how has their social media engagement been for ASICS specific posts? And I think that was a breakthrough where they're like, oh, that's cool. Like we can just do that without having to do extra work. So I think that was a good breakthrough to show that we could do it. I think in execution, where maybe it was hard, was I wanted to make that like a goal, a standard goal even of mine, of saying like, I want to set up this infrastructure and do it across all of our athletes, across all sports and all these things. And I was given the advice, and it was a very well-meaning piece of advice, and it's right, that from our senior GM of saying like, I really respect what you're doing and it makes sense. I don't want you to bite off more than you can chew, because if you aren't, like, this doesn't just depend on you. It's going to depend on a lot of partnership with each region and each sports marketing member and each athlete that they've contracted. If you can't achieve this, then I don't want you to feel like at the end of the year, like your goals haven't been met. Yeah, like bite off, like try doing it for 10 athletes, see how it goes. And then maybe we can try to scale, but don't try to like do it all in 1 year kind of thing.
Yeah. So it's like a big idea, but then you meet how innovation actually happens inside big organizations. It takes time, right? Like I think that's what she was trying to hint to you. It's like, I'm seeing it in the numbers. That's the power of data. But how do we convince people? How do we change OKRs first? Do you think that is the right place to start, with 10 athletes and seeing how the bite you can chew? Or would you have said, hey, let's take a big swing? I really think we can do this.
No, I think the 10 athletes approach makes sense. You then just have to be, even prioritizing those 10 athletes is a good debate to have, right? Like some people would say you should prioritize those 10 athletes based on who has the highest value of contract. That's a great rationale. Someone else would say you should prioritize who has the highest social following, because those aren't always the same. And a third might even say you should prioritize the athletes that are most enthusiastic about talking about ASICS on social. That can also be a totally different group of people. So I think it is good to prioritize, and you want to figure out how you can make the most impact. I do think long term, eventually I would like to think that CMOs everywhere are going to want to say, even at sport companies, like, how do you justify this endorsement deal? And it can't just be the accomplishments. I would like to think the industry is eventually going to have to move that way. Maybe I'm wrong.
Do you think people like the senior GM see the pressure of living in that middle? How familiar do you think they are with what the pressures are there?
I think the right leaders do, right? Like that senior GM, he wasn't my direct manager. We just worked together very closely, and he's someone that formally or informally mentors a lot of people, including me. So I think he was always very good at looking at things through the lens of, if he spotted people that have these sort of big ideas that want to roll up their sleeves and do the work, that's a positive thing. But then also thinking, okay, I'm glad that she has the drive and the tenacity, but how do I make sure that she's set up for success and doesn't fall? So I think good leaders do that. But I mean, there's other leaders that are, unfortunately or fortunately, like either they're very goal focused, where they can't think big picture because they have to just, with the limited resources and team members they have, they just have to get them to prioritize the things that cross the finish line and stuff. So I'm not trying to say it's only leadership quality. Obviously, you have to be set up for success.
For anyone who's listening, who's in the middle, you're in the middle of other things, in the middle of corporate, in between finding out what's next. Like, what would be your suggestion?
From a personal growth leadership perspective, if you're kind of in that middle management area, I think it's good to be mindful of your strengths and your development areas, but also remember that those might look differently in different organizations and different teams. So if one organization or team, let's say, tells you that you're too detail oriented, another leader might really value that because of the need that they have within their team or their business or their org. So being mindful of that as you meet different leaders or hiring managers or jobs. And I think the other, which I'm trying to be better about myself as well, is to keep your options open beyond just like what your ideal role is, and more into, okay, maybe these are some full-time things that I could be pursuing, but also here are these business ideas that I have. Try to pursue them in tandem. You never know which one might stick or might give you that sort of energy to kind of rocket ship yourself. Again, easier said than done, but I've been trying to do that more and more.
I feel like this whole thing of just being one thing doesn't need to be that. We don't need that limiting vocabulary anymore. It helps us evolve as we go. Abha, this has been so amazing. I thank you for teaching me something today. If you're listening and you're in that middle space right now, leading from both directions, I hope this reminds you that the middle isn't a waiting room. It's where leadership muscle is built.
Now make sure you subscribe to Evolve Voices, this leading and incredible project where our ambassadors are interviewing amazing professionals from all over the world so they can share their perspective and benefit you with their perspective, their knowledge, and you can understand what's happening in the different markets. Evolve Voices is a project part of the Evolve Commerce Club, the #1 and leading community where we connect international professionals in the world of commerce. We are now connecting professionals in more than 40 markets, and every week we invite an expert to share their perspective and their knowledge. So if you'd like to know more, you can always look at the comments. We have a link there so you can request your application and stay tuned for the next episode. Thanks for watching. All the best. Ciao.